How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Hold on, I gotta get plug my headphones.
Yeah, you're good.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Okay. Oh yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect.
Where are you coming out of?
I'm in Texas, but
Okay.
yeah, we just moved down here from Maine a little while ago.
Wow, that's quite a contrast from Maine to Texas.
Yeah, I went from a very blue state to a very red state, and
Yeah.
you can tell. You
Wow.
can tell.
Yeah, I remember the first thing that struck me about Texas was when I saw the flags flying at the same height. I was like, "Uh-oh. There there's a whole other
There's a
thing."
in the time we've been here, there have been like four shootings like close to me. They busted a serial killer.
Oh no.
Yeah, record heat. It's pretty bad here.
It sounds like a story from Stephen King, which came from Maine, was pulled down to Texas.
Right, right, right.
That's wild. Well, hey, you
Yeah.
have quite a story. And before we get into that, let's deal with something heavy we all dealt with globally, which was the pandemic. How did you survive that 3 year period now that we're in the post-pandemic era? And
Honest,
how has it changed things now?
honestly, um, well, it was it was a lot better than prison. So I mean, me and my fiance, we were like, man, this isn't that bad. You get your own TV, your own house. Like it's just going out in public. Like you don't have proper medical care in jail, so like you develop hypochondriac like mentality because you watch people die around you from very treatable things.
Wow.
So like someone comes in and they look like they might have, I don't know, MRSA or something, and you're freaking out about it because you know if you get it, you're not going to get, treated for it. And it's something simple and stupid like that could be treated with antibiotics, but they just don't care.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was the anxiety with that really bothered me. And other than that, the whole lockdown really didn't affect me at all because
Right.
I've done real solitary time. But I did do some like art shows in the community, and I found this company called the Galleriste, and they like turn your art into this beautiful like feminine line. So that was pretty
Nice.
cool.
Yeah. So it's all as we all learn with mental health over this time, it's all relative. I mean, you take your life and what you've been used to in the worst scenario, and you're like, okay, it's a pandemic. We can still roam. I mean, that's the thing. If you,
Yeah, I was like, hey, I can go for walks. I can leave whenever I
sure,
want to. Like, and I didn't leave my house very much anyway because I have so much anxiety, out in the real world now since prison. So it really didn't affect me that much. But I mean, I'm watching all these other people going, this lockdown is the worst thing
yeah,
ever. And I'm like, yeah, try prison. Like, and
yeah,
every day I woke up, I'm like, I'm so grateful I'm not in jail right now. I'm so grateful I'm not in jail right now because that like in jail they forced everybody into solitary. Like they were keeping people who had tested positive for COVID in general population for 6 days after they
yeah,
tested.
yeah.
Like it was terrible. It got to the point where the guards and the inmates united and said, you are putting us in danger, like to the
Wow.
institution. And that's like unheard of.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Well, let's get to the essence of what you do now. We'll get to the timeline of how everything got to now, but let's say you were in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day, and one of the kids says, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer that child?
well, I contract my own cleaning jobs, and I have an environmentally friendly clothing brand that I sell in stores. And I paint the designs. I don't make the clothes, but I paint the designs, and then the company creates them, and it also comes in plus sizes too. So
Right on.
yeah, I just got the rest of my inventory down to Texas, so I'm going to be doing like vendor shows down here.
Okay. So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream when you grew up?
I think I wanted to be a marine biologist, something to do with animals.
Okay. So let's get to this timeline here of, obviously there was jail and now there's recovery and a whole new world you're living in.
Yeah.
Take me back to your childhood and talk to me a little bit about what the timeline looked like as you kind of started becoming your own person and things happen and now you're out. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So I was adopted at like 2 weeks old, and my parents, they lived in Brooklyn, New York, and my dad got a job at the University of Maine, so that's why we moved up to Maine. And I
Okay.
lived there most of my life. They had a messy divorce, but other than that, like I was never exposed to like violence or drugs or chaos as a child. But when I got out on my own, I started dating some really violent men, and he my ex assaulted me to the point like my skull was showing, and I didn't do drugs before that. So when I went to the hospital, they literally had to sew the muscle back, then sew the skin back, and I started getting seizures from the brain damage, and I'd go deaf and blind for moments at a time. I also found out I was pregnant that day.
Wow.
So and I noticed like I was on state insurance. I wasn't on my parents' private insurance anymore. So I noticed I was treated different, like because now I was like technically in the poor class. And they gave me Vicodin, and at first I took it, but then when I went back, they're like, "All right, you need to go to the pain clinic now. Your blood pressure is still up there, with the amount of pain you're in, and you normally have a very low blood pressure, and you're gonna have to like you have post concussive syndrome, from this injury." And so when I went to the pain clinic, they started, prescribing me Vicodin every 2 weeks. And at first I tried to refuse, and I was like, I'm pregnant. I don't want to be on that stuff. Like I watched my entire community like get addicted and, go down the tubes basically, because
Yeah.
Big Pharma had to come through the back door of all these rural communities. And they told me I was on too small of a dose to get addicted, and if I didn't follow doctor's orders, then that it would result in a call to Child Protective Services for endangering my unborn child.
Wow.
And all opioids do is make the pain receptors in your brain more sensitive. So when it wears off, you're in like 10 times the amount of pain. So my blood pressure was going to skyrocket anyway. And of course, he was an addict and he was abusing me, so he'd just take my pills whenever he wanted them. And when I didn't have them, I'd end up going to the hospital because I'd be having seizures and I'd be excruciating pain. And um yeah, so that's basically how, and I'm not blaming the doctors for my addiction. Like I want to make that clear, because it's not their fault I got addicted, but it's their fault they threatened me with that. Like
Sure.
that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would have happened if I was still on my parents private insurance. Like I could definitely see like I was being treated differently, and I just couldn't figure out why at the time. I was only like 19. I didn't really comprehend, the class system we have in America. I didn't comprehend that till I went to prison and, saw things for what they were. But yeah, the abuse got worse. He'd trap me in the bathroom and torture me for hours, like to the point where I'd be begging him to kill me. And finally, he put me in the hospital one last time, and then got into a high-speed chase with the cops. And I went to the battered women's shelter in Bangor, Spruce Run. And first they called me a liar. They said that women come in there crying. So obviously I had to be lying because I wasn't crying. Well,
Right.
when I was 8 months pregnant, he held a knife up to my face after he'd been pushing me around, and I started crying. So he holds a knife up to my face and goes, "One more tear rolls down your cheek, I'm going to cut your face off." So after that, I would just go into like shell shock mode and not cry because I didn't want to get my face cut off.
Yeah.
And then this shelter used that against me and said they didn't believe me, and they said they had two beds open. So I went and I got the police reports, I got my hospital records, all that. And then they did a complete 180, and they said, "Well, your injuries are so extensive and your situation is so dangerous, we can't help you because it puts the other women in the shelter in danger." The girl who got the bed, the guy didn't even hit her, he kicked her car. And that's domestic violence, destruction of property and intimidation. But, compared to my situation where I would have been dead if I hadn't gone to the hospital, like that's what, makes me mad. So drug dealers protected me basically. Like they gave me a place to stay. They, gave me drugs to sell so I could make money. Cause, he'd just show up at my job and, get me fired. And it was always just, all the things that come along with domestic violence, it was financial abuse. Anytime I had money, he'd take it from me. Whether it was my son's birthday, whether it was for the rent, he would just take it from me and go buy drugs with it. And so eventually I got charges in 2011. And yeah, got to go to jail and see how wonderful our, land of the free is, with our highest rate of incarceration and, 25% of the global incarceration population. Like we have more people in prison than entire continents.
Yeah.
And, like 70% of the women in prison have some sort of domestic violence or sexual assault in their past before they even get to prison. Like we're the women that, slipped through the cracks and, nobody helped us. So we, fell apart and did the wrong thing and just trying to survive. Like I was literally just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And, I'm not proud that I profited off of people's addiction, not in any capacity. In fact, it was when I finally sobered up in jail and me and my friend were sitting there talking, and like we knew 20 couples who lost their kids to CPS because of the substance we were selling them. And we were both like, yeah, we deserve to be here. Like that's what we're making money off of. And,
Right.
I don't ever want to make money off of a product that causes, that much destruction and chaos and suffering. Like I don't want to do that.
Yeah. So how long were you in prison?
3 years straight, and then I went back for 9 months. Well, okay, in 2011 I did 7 months because the state picked it up, and then the feds picked it up in 2013, and I literally got charged from 2 different jurisdictions for the same drugs. Like there's no such thing as double jeopardy when it comes to drug dealers and the feds. Like, because they say, oh, the state's a different jurisdiction, so we're charging you with conspiracy, but it was for the same bus. Like I literally got held accountable for the same drugs twice.
Oh.
And yeah.
So what did that do for you? Like ultimately, after you got out and you decided that that wasn't something you wanted to do anymore, what were the very clear things that you hold on to every day now?
um my sobriety. I try to make a lot of gratitude lists because it's just so hard in this country right now. Like everybody's depressed, everybody's miserable, everybody is just fighting to survive. And I keep focusing on the message that I'm trying to get out there and educate people on what's really going on and how horribly people are being treated. And I'm trying to get my brand out there. And I want to sell beauty and a brand that makes people feel empowered and stunning, and confident about themselves. Like that's the kind of thing I want to put out there. You know I don't want to engage in anything that's toxic or just corrupt in any type of way. And unfortunately, most most things in America right now are pretty corrupt. Whether it's medical, whether it's colleges, the military, it's all very corrupt.
Well, the thing that you mentioned about the care that you got, medically speaking, it was different, which is just very strange to me. But it just shows that increasing chasm that America's fallen into. There's a very short list of people that have owned most of everything. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all of these other people. And then everybody else that's trying to fight and claw to get by every day. Inflation's going up. I remember when COVID started and everybody was like, yeah, these restaurants will make it. Everybody's going to be okay. Yeah, they are, because everything's gone up. All of these companies are making the money back that they lost over those 3 years. Like there's a very simple cycle that goes into economics. And as time has gone on, the rich have just gotten richer. They own more of the GDP. And we're just sitting
Yeah.
down here getting scraps. We're like sucker fish, you know? It's crazy.
We went before the pandemic. There were 3 empty properties for every homeless man, woman, and child in America. Now there's 29. They are profiting off of the suffering of the
Yeah,
American people, and this is why they're doing it. I'll tell you why. I figured it out. So
sure.
over the pandemic, All these prisons across America were taking out PPP loans to
Uh-huh.
add wings onto
Uh-huh.
their prisons so they
Uh-huh.
could add more beds.
Yeah.
The money that was supposed to go to the people. Okay, so when we go to prison, we work 40 hours a week all month for $5.25. A hospital saves $350,000 a year contracting their linen to be washed by inmates. This is all about a free workforce.
Yeah.
If you get all these people homeless, criminalize homelessness, and then lock them up, you have a free workforce. And inmates do every kind of job. We had inmates fighting wildfires out in California. We had inmates, moving dead COVID bodies. They do laundry, they do, road construction, all for pennies a day. And this is why they're doing it. They don't care about crime, they profit off of crime. The judges, the lawyers, the jail facilities, and all these corporations said, we'll buy out all your prisons as long as they stay 90% full capacity. So people are the product.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's literally what it's all about.
So for everything that you've had to go through, I mean, even from the word go and going through prison and everything that you've experienced, how do you remain hopeful? How do you remain at this point where you think that maybe karma is going to come through? I mean, how do you do that?
Um, well, honestly, like every couple months I freak out and I try to like look for a country I can move to, and then that never ends up working out for me. But yeah, like I just try and, stay hopeful, like that maybe my message will get to the right person in the right position and they can, really address this stuff that's happening. I mean, all the millionaires became billionaires while the rest of us lost everything. I mean, the fact that like the people haven't risen up yet is just, crazy to me. They got us too busy fighting each other, and like it just baffles me. I mean, when the French Revolution popped off, the wealth gap between the rich and the poor was smaller than what it is in America,
Yeah.
between the rich and the poor.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing that, Congress always has the lowest approval rating of anybody. At the end of the day, no one's happy with how everything's going. But yeah, we just kind of keep going along that spirit of whether it's the 60s or any other
Yeah.
revolution we've seen in our human history. There's a level of complacency that we just have fallen into. I mean,
Yeah, I think we should all refuse to go to work and refuse to buy stuff. Like, all pick a day where we all just say, nope, we're not doing it.
yeah. So
Because
let
if
me ask.
we, hey, I'm sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, I agree. And I don't want to preach anything that's too dangerous, but I think there should come a point where we all just decide that we're not going to vote and we're not
Or
going to
we're not
elect
going to
these
pay
people.
taxes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to be the anarchist, but I think at one point, if these people with all of their little signs and all of their little speeches and their fake
Right.
smiles, if they got us to say, you know what, not really, not feeling it, I'm not doing it, you
Yeah.
know,
You
it,
have Marjorie Grey Taylor, saying, I don't make enough money, and crying about the January 6th terrorists, not being able to get a haircut. We went without water for 3 days at Danbury during the hottest days of year, and you're crying
yep,
over a haircut.
uh-huh.
I'm like, this has got to be how Black people feel when they hear white people cry about oppression. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's insane. So who's been kind of a role model for you? Who's been somebody that's inspired you to, really be who you are and to get through things?
um, you know, I have a couple actually. Vincent Van Gogh, he always, inspired me because, I struggle with mental health, and, he was just ridiculed and cast aside his whole life. And today he's remembered as, one of the greatest artists of all time. And, Britney Spears, I can't even believe I'm saying that because I'm like a super metal chick, and, I love, hard stuff, and I never listened to her. But when she got up and she testified what they were doing to her,
Oh
and,
yeah.
all the horrible stuff they put her through, I was like, oh my God. Like, I started quoting her. Like, when I talk to these state reps, like, I'll be like, that's what sex traffickers do. Like what Britney Spears said, like, this is what they're doing to, women in jail. Like, I witnessed an entire pod of women get stripped out because they signed up for a razor, and a male sergeant wanted a list of who shaved their vaginas and who didn't. And this is just the PG stuff that goes on. Like
Sure.
imagine like your wife or your daughter being told, you need a strip so I can see your grooming preferences. I mean, that is sexual assault. And I like the women that don't back down, that refuse to be quiet and just submit.
Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean, all of it is, and it's behavior that just gets shot down. I mean, and that's the thing. I think the Me Too movement, I think, has been a really positive thing for the world.
Yeah.
But I think also there's a level of us that have lost that like era of like the 80s where you could go run around and not worry about certain things, or everything's under a microscope now, you know.
Right.
I mean, the
Right.
bad guys and the bastards need to be smoked out of their hole, period. Okay. Whether
Hmm.
it's a politician or it's a movie mogul or if it's a guy down the street. But at the end of the day, if we get to a point as human beings where all we're doing is looking for something to go wrong, that's going to tax our brain into a place where
Yeah.
freedom doesn't exist anymore.
Right. And there's one thing I always try to bring up, because yeah, obviously the Me Too movement, predators flock to institutions like prisons to work at, because I'm a predator's favorite victim. I have a bipolar diagnosis. I used to be a drug dealer. I'm a recovering addict. Any defense attorney is going to, tear me up on the stand just on those facts alone. Like, I mean, I've had conservative women tell me, well, if you don't want to get raped by cops, then don't go to prison.
Mm.
Like, like, there are people, like, this is such a rape culture and misogynistic culture we live in. Like, it's literally okay for certain men to abuse certain types of women. And these predators know that. They know that certain victims aren't going to be believed. They know that. And you know even if they are believed, it'll turn into, oh well, you should be grateful anybody wanted you to begin with. Like, that's literally how women like me are treated. And these predators know that, and they love these institutions. They love going to these institutions because they have their union, paid for by the taxpayers. They'll get the best lawyer to defend and lie for them, and they have the badge to back them up.
Yeah.
I mean, you're 6 times more likely to be sexually assaulted by a law enforcement officer than you are a civilian. And I remember when I was at Cumberland County Jail, they used to bring juveniles from Long Creek. And it was always the same story. And they are always in the news up in Maine for either breaking a kid's arm, choking them out, sexual assault, something. They brought this one 17-year-old girl. She got tired of getting raped and she snapped and stabbed the CO. Well, it was like high ranking, staff that were doing this to these kids. And, the lower, officers didn't want to say anything because, oh, it's their job and, all that. So it was just this whole thing of, corruption. They told her she was going back on Christmas, and she slit her throat that night.
Mm.
I mean, she lived, but, that was better than going back to one of those places. She'd
Yeah.
already done 18 months. She only had 2 weeks left.
Wow.
And like, this is what's happening. And
Yeah.
especially the kids in the juvenile centers. Like, I can't help it, but I pray for them every day because I know they're getting abused, and I know no one's going to listen to them. It's even worse for them because the kids aren't believed, period.
Yeah. Right.
And it's just, we have this such a toxic, misogynistic rape culture going on.
Yeah. You've had to overcome a lot, obviously, in your life. What are you the proudest of? What is the thing that you've done that you're the proudest of in your life?
I'm pretty proud of the fact that I got some bills passed. Working with the Maine state representatives, they passed a bill mandating all jails in Maine provide feminine hygiene products, both tampons and pads, for free in all the jails. And that's a problem too. Like, you can't get tampons in a lot of these facilities. And if you do, they do have them on the commissary. They'll triple charge, what they cost out here. And again, we're only making like pennies a day.
Yeah.
So, and women will literally make their own tampons and get themselves sick because they're just desperate, and that shouldn't happen. You get over $100 a day per inmate. You should be able to give people feminine hygiene products.
Yeah.
And they passed a a city ordinance. It didn't pass in the state, but up in Maine, we had all these landlords charging these outrageous application fees, and not even renting the apartment. So they'd get like triple the rent in application fees and not have to turn anything on. So, and it was driving the housing crisis up. And, I told them, I was like, you have to get rid of these application fees. This is predatory. It's like the banks and their overdraft fees. It's just free money to them, and they're not even looking at the application. Like, we paid $1,000 trying to apply to apartments just for them to tell us no. And so they passed a city ordinance in Bangor, a tenant bill of rights, saying that you can only charge an application fee if a lease is signed. And, that's fair. That's the way it should be across the board. Like, you should not be getting, 10 grand in application fees. Like, just
Yeah.
for, like 78 people looked at the apartment and you couldn't find a single tenant out of them. Like, come on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's another one that's in the process of getting on the table. So Somerset County forced me to strip in front of cameras under duress of being maced and extracted. These were the same people that wanted a list of grooming preferences for the women. Well, they have cameras illegally placed inside their SMU cells, and they lied to their commissioner. They said that there were no cameras in there. It's a lie. And I said, well, if it's a lie, if I'm lying, then why can't I have my paperwork? I filed a PREA complaint against them that stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act when I was at Alderson Prison in West Virginia. When they got the complaint back, they deemed it unfounded while admitting to everything I was complaining about. And Alderson wouldn't even allow me to hold it to read it myself. They read it to me and said I couldn't have a copy. So, like, imagine filing paperwork and being told you can't have a copy of it.
Wow.
Like, this is how they're bearing the abuse. So when you get out, you have 100 days to file a complaint. If you don't do it within that time, then you're screwed. But the first thing they ask you is, where was the outcry at the time? Where was the paperwork? Did you go up the proper chain of command? Well, yes, I did, but they didn't give me the paperwork. They refused to give me the paperwork. So when I got out, it was in the paper that Somerset County was refusing to hand over documents to the media, saying they didn't have to for officers, disciplinary stuff. And when they finally did, they'd write, oh, officer would get suspended for 3 days, but not say why. So that's how they're covering for their officers.
Wow.
And it was in there that the same officer that was telling me to kill myself in solitary, like while I was in psychosis they gave me the wrong medication, they told another inmate to kill themselves. And they had to cut that inmate down from a suicide attempt. So I requested, after reading that article, the copy of the PREA complaint. I went to the Freedom of Information Act. They could not find this complaint. And it was just another article just came out that the BOP has been, refusing to hand over PREA complaints. And it stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. So anything sexual goes under PREA. So they're refusing to give all this paperwork to the Freedom of Information Act just so they can, keep abusing people and get away with it. So I've been talking to the Maine state reps, and I'm like, something needs to happen because they're killing people in there. They're sexually assaulting people, and there's no consequence. And, the jail told them, well, there's already a law in place saying that we have to give the inmates the paperwork. I said, yes, there is, but there's no consequence for these institutions if they don't follow the law. And they know that. So they'll just not respond and, say too bad. So, I mean, I'm pushing for, there needs to be like a $500 a day fine that the inmate can sue them, if they refuse to give paperwork. So that's what I'm working on right now. And that should just be across the board, Oh, and the other thing was, after I got out, the officers at Alderson that, wouldn't even let me read the paperwork or hold it or have a copy, the captain and 4 of his subordinates all got convicted of raping and stalking inmates and tampering with PREA evidence. So I wasn't even their only victim, or by far not even close to their worst victim. Like, this is what's going on in these prisons. Like, I met a handful of women that had been sterilized against their will in American prisons. And these were American inmates. This was before Trump filled up the ICE camps. And you heard about, refugee women getting sterilized against their will or
Yeah.
without their knowledge. They were doing this to American women. And after like the fourth woman I met, I put it together and I'm going, oh my God, none of these women are white. And now all of a sudden it's a great day for white lives with the overturning of Roe v. Wade.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. After all of this time and everything that you're fighting for, everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, all these people around you. But what's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, I'm kind of on this healing journey. And when you finally like step out of, survival mode and, start to actually really process these things and, kind of hash them out, like, okay, this really isn't part of my personality. This was just something I was doing to, survive and, get through it. And, I'm actually a lot more sensitive than I ever wanted to admit. Like I would just kind of like gaslight myself and be like, I've been through worse. I've been through worse. And, I was like, you know, everyone thought I was like really tough. Everyone always told me like, oh, you're so strong. You're so tough. Like, and I really wasn't. I was just, shutting off my emotions, like to the point where I didn't feel anything. And like, that's not good either. So, I mean, I'm kind of just finding my way back slowly, I guess.
So you have so much going on between your clothing and what you're doing with
Yeah.
legislation. If anyone wants to learn more about you, they're inspired, they want to reach out, where's the best place for them to go?
So I'm on Instagram and TikTok, and I am on Twitter, but I never go on there. And the handles are all the same. It's EPM underscore art underscore 1111. And the clothing website is legalaries.com/en/Elizabeth.Mikotowicz. And you have to put my name because there are other artists that, have a line with Legalaries. I have some stuff to show you guys actually. So this is one of my scarves.
Ooh, yeah, that's
Yes.
nice.
And everything's environmentally friendly. And
Sure.
in the last year, they decided that they were going to do plus sizes. So
Yeah.
I am all about being inclusive to everybody. And especially, we as women, we are just told since, the time we're born that, our worth depends on how skinny and pretty we are. And, we have a lot of brands that will size their clothes really, really small, and I've watched my friends go into like body dysmorphia issues because, the size that should fit them is way too small.
Yeah.
And so I was really happy with this brand. They're from Canada. Everything's, eco-friendly. And the sizing, it's perfect. It's
Yeah.
actually a little bit big.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's great. That's not gonna, affect anybody's, eating disorders or body dysmorphia issues, because that's the last thing I want. Like, I've never dealt with eating disorders, but I'm high functioning autistic, and I've gone through just about every other diagnosis they could throw at me because they couldn't figure out, why I was different.
Yeah.
And come to find out, I'm actually not bipolar, and I
Yeah.
don't actually need all those meds, and they were just putting me in psychosis anyway. And for anybody out there like with a diagnosis, don't take it as like you're broken or defective. You just process things different, and
Sure.
that's okay. If everybody, we're not meant to be the same. In fact, I'm like, I'll have like these little superpowers that, like I can, I can stay awake for 24 hours and get a whole bunch of stuff done. I mean, I'll crash and not be able to wake up, but it's they act like you're ruined or you're defective, and you're not. You just have to find a way to make it work for you. You're going to struggle in areas that other people aren't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I hate this Western society that oh, if you have a mental diagnosis, like you're put in a box, a
Yeah.
defective box for your whole life. Like,
Yeah.
no, you're not.
I agree.
And like, I have little bags and stuff like
Beautiful.
that. I've got shawls. I've got something for everybody. And one day I'll be like super gothic and like dark femme, kind
Yeah.
of like one of these pieces. And then
Sure.
the next day it'll be like flowers and butterflies. So, I mean, yeah,
Yeah, that's
there's
beautiful.
there's something for everybody. Oh, and you can see the paintings on the tags.
Oh, cool.
and on the website. If you go
Yeah.
to the website, there is like a little art gallery there. Yeah. Also, if anybody's interested, I haven't been on there in a while, but I've been creating a series on TikTok about the violence against women that I witnessed in prison. If people are interested in that,
Okay.
like we really need to address this, because they're calling it rehabilitation, and they're abusing people. Like,
Sure.
if you want to abuse people and call it punishment, fine, call it
Right.
that, but you're not going to sit here and say that you're rehabilitating somebody. Solitary, when you're in solitary, your brain literally slows down from the lack of stimulation.
Yeah.
So when I got out, people talking over each other would overwhelm me, like to the point where I'd panic. And my first instinct was, who do I got to fight?
Yeah.
Who am I fighting?
Yeah.
Because the only stimulation you have in there is violence and chaos.
Yeah.
And, the rest of the time it's nothing. So it makes normal stimulation, completely overwhelming. And this is what they're letting people out. And, they're wondering why they freak out and, do something crazy. Like, you rewire their brain to, not function normally in society.
Sure. Well, Elizabeth, your story has been wonderful. Thank you so much for opening up. I loved the designs. I hope people go out and pick it up. Stay strong. Thank you so much for being
Thank you.
courageous enough to open up about it. I appreciate it. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.